And we're going to talk about bridging the UX gap with an analysis into cognitive, emotive, and behavioral design. So today we're going to get into our fields today. We're going to think about UX from a psychological perspective. We all share a common mission of onboarding the next billion users to Web3, but how have we thought of crypto-newcomers in this mission? Crypto-newcomers, I think we've all been one before, becoming more power users or more curious users, but they bring Web2 mental models. And that means they have unconscious and subconscious expectations of how products behave based on what they've been using so far in Web2. We're going to analyze their 3 core onboarding flows. I'm going to break down signing up, onboarding, and committing one task. And I really want to highlight empathy as just not a trendy term when we do UX design or product design, but it's really meeting where users are and empathizing with the emotions flowing through them as they engage and onboard to Web3. And I'm breaking down 3 core onboarding flows: signing up, onboarding, and committing a task, because I think it takes a user from a curiosity mindset to taking an action towards that curiosity. And then committing a task would give them a sense of agency and control over their experience. And I'd like to introduce what's called an experience stack, where a user's thoughts inform their feelings and ultimately influence the type of behavior that they engage in. Behavior as in change in the outcome that they want to see, the choices that they engage in with your product or features. And this highlights the interconnectedness and a continuous cycle that's very prevalent in our psychology. This is very fundamental in cognitive behavioral therapy, but we're not going to get into therapy today. I want you to meet Charlie, who's going to be a common thread throughout my talk. I'll be referring to her as she, her, and crypto-newcomer for simplicity. Charlie feels a sense of FOMO, and she feels a little behind in engaging with Web3 because people in her life own some Bitcoin or ETH. She's also heard about some ETFs that she wants to invest in. And just to get to know her a little better and her psychology a little better, she's an adjunct professor in her mid-30s with the technical proficiency of being able to use her smartphone and computer on a day-to-day basis, engaging with a lot of applications that we're already familiar with, a lot of Web2 applications. Her short-term goals in onboarding to Web3 is to understand the basics of Web3 and cryptocurrency, and most importantly, to purchase her $100 worth of Bitcoin or ETH. And her longer-term goals are to diversify her asset types, stay informed about emerging Web3 trends, and possibly use crypto to purchase everyday essentials. And a big disclaimer here is that Charlie comprises a very small percentage of crypto-newcomers. We have to think about how diverse the world is: APAC, EMEA, Latin America, South America. I bring the perspective of a designer who is based in New York City, so it's a very Western lens, right? So in sum, Charlie, our user, wants to get started in Web3 through the retail experience as an entry point of buying $100 worth of Bitcoin or ETH. But when she starts to approach her onboarding experience, I'm sure we've all seen something like this as a search result: flashy YouTube videos, lots of suggestions on which wallets to download. I know MetaMask has been one. And questions answering questions and not really leading us to the answers we want to seek. This leads Charlie to feel, as a crypto-newcomer, very overwhelmed with the technical jargon. She has a lot of security concerns about the safety of starting in Web3 due to potential scams and scary headlines. there's a level of complexity of setting herself up with digital wallets, and that ultimately causes intimidation and trust issues about which platforms, exchanges to engage with. And ultimately, Charlie wants to know how can she integrate crypto into her existing financial systems. For those who just walked in, I'm going more into the psychology of UX by thinking about the interconnectedness of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So we have to remember that Charlie, as a crypto newcomer, has a very specific Web2 lens with ingrained behaviors and expectations of how digital products should behave and work. So now I'm going to dive into the think, feel, behave interconnection as she onboards to crypto by comparing Web2 versus Web3 onboarding flows. Starting with signing up, we see a lot of creating usernames or inputting emails. These are all very familiar to us, whether we link social accounts, creating or generating new passwords using a password manager, terms and conditions. And for Charlie, this is mostly done on autopilot, right? When is the last time you signed up for a Web2 service and you just kept clicking the button to get started or proceed, which means there's a level of confidence, adequacy, and trusting and satisfaction when signing up. So ultimately, there's a lack of drop-off during a Web2 sign-up flow versus Web3. I've categorized it into legacy patterns versus newer patterns. Legacy patterns where we rely on secret recovery phrases, security disclaimers, connection modals. Newer patterns of social login signers, embedded wallets, and smart accounts. Passkeys aren't specific to Web3, as some of us might know, but it's being integrated with more and more Web3 or centralized exchange platforms. And here, crypto newcomers like Charlie, she's already going to have the start of her signing up experience in Web3 with a higher cognitive load because she enters a space with new patterns and unfamiliarity, which leads her to feel a sense of curiosity, but she's starting to feel a little confused and anxious about whether signing up is the right choice. There's a sense of insecurity when you don't know what's going to happen during the sign-up process. So there's either going to be a drop-off here or a completion rate. Let's say that Charlie successfully signs up, and there's certain onboarding patterns that exist in Web2. Again, we're all very familiar with this, right? We've all onboarded to a platform or a service before. There's a lot of segmented information that's visually quantified. There's carousel walkthroughs, modal guides, tooltip walkthroughs. Those are some of the patterns that we rely on as designers when we create onboarding flows. We tend to solicit key user information to set them up successfully with their accounts, with the focus on progression. So again, Charlie, very used to Web2 applications, she's going to still be rooted in familiarity. And as designers, we focus on the path of least friction for onboarding. And that might mean fewest amount of clicks. That might also mean compartmentalized or segmented information. And ultimately, still, Charlie will continue on her experience with a lower drop-off rate. Versus in Web3, key patterns, it's not much different, right? We still rely on segmenting information based on what the user needs to complete by using carousel walkthroughs, tooltip walkthroughs, security disclaimers. And particular to Web3, there might be network selections. There's segmented information, but it requires more steps and a density of information and a sense of doubling down on security for users. And crypto newcomers like Charlie is going to feel a sense of overwhelm, a bit of irritation on and impatience on how slow it is to get started. She's going to feel a sense of anxiety due to the amount of information she has to remember and understand. So she's starting to feel like, do I even get started in Web3? Is this worth it? What are the benefits and cost factors of signing up and onboarding? But let's say she successfully onboards and sets herself up. When users commit one task in Web2, there's typically a verb-oriented task, right? We create accounts, we send money, we purchase food, we order delivery, among other patterns. There's a sense of creating an obvious affordance. Affordances are key signifiers like a doorknob that allow you to know how to enter or where to enter. So again, crypto newcomers like Charlie know what to expect. There's a root of familiarity in getting started in Web 2. So she might be content, eager, she might be creative or trusting of the application. Some of the negative feelings might arise when she runs into friction in a flow state. So once she accounts friction in the flow state that interrupts the way she behaves on autopilot, she might drop off or still have a successful completion rate. Versus Web3, we use a lot of new terms, and one of our content designers speaks about this as well. For crypto newcomers like Charlie, she's going to face funding accounts or on-ramping or connecting to a third party to fund that account, making a type of transaction, learning about gas fees, and receiving gifts for signing up, among other patterns. But we have to remember that Charlie's goal is to purchase her first $100 of Bitcoin or ETH. She doesn't want to get distracted. She already started with having to think about how to sign up and onboard in Web3. So with this overwhelm of information, she's going to start to feel a little bit discouraged, hopeful and eager, but still critical and skeptical about the validity of owning this asset in her financial stack. Which means, due to these feelings, we might not see a successful completion rate for crypto newcomers like Charlie. And if you noticed anything interesting, the more people are made to think, the more they engage with their thoughts, their feelings. Oh, that's a typo. My bad. And the more that we engage with our thoughts, the more complex our feelings become. See, I had to think right there on my feet, so I got a little nervous. That's how our psychology works. So designs impact users' cognition, emotions, and behavior. And this includes technical design as well, because design and engineering must work hand in hand to understand how to create solutions that are more familiar with users. And in Web3, again, users start with a higher cognitive load from the get-go, which leaves them feeling lost, impatient, overwhelmed, disempowered, and more. So this leads to drop-off rates. We've seen that across our products as well. Conversion loss, lack of ecosystem growth and diversity, and crypto newcomer alienation. So specifically, what should we do as our next steps? Takeaway one is that we have to remember that crypto newcomers like Charlie bring ingrained behaviors, thoughts, expectations of how products behave from a Web 2 perspective. That means they have subconscious and unconscious belief systems that drive them to choose how to behave on autopilot. When you see a stop sign or a green light, do you even think about it, or do you press the pedal to stop or go? So what I suggest people to do when ideating is to focus on setting clear expectations, by defining concepts progressively rooted in familiarity. And this isn't an exhaustive list of suggestions. I really hope you consult your designers and researchers as you build your products. Takeaway 2 is that users are, again, innately human. We tend to quantify users. We tend to group them with metrics. But humans are beautifully complex, and as are you, as am I, as is a photographer. So what choices are we encouraging or discouraging people to engage in as they onboard to Web3? And I want you to be introduced to The Feelings Wheel by Dr. Gloria Wilcox at the Gottman Institute. The wheel shows the complex layers that exist under the surface of certain emotions that arise. And this isn't just about feeling our feelings, right? It's really illustrative of how important it is to personify our users beyond metrics. And the importance here is to focus on developing personas and really study your users beyond a simple survey, make it iterative, really understand their motivations. And for example, Charlie, her motivation is to purchase her $100 worth of Bitcoin or ETH. The underlying action is purchase, but the actual motivation is to not feel FOMO. She doesn't want to feel anxious about not having enough diversified assets in her financial portfolio. She also doesn't want to feel like she wants to risk all of her money. So the underlying motivation is to solve for that anxiety or that sense of falling behind from her peers. And the means to an end might be the action of purchasing. And takeaway 3 is, brain fart. Takeaway 3 is that we need to consider the experience stack, thought, feelings, and behaviors, and not just the tech stack. I really believe in designers and researchers being able to get involved earlier on in the ideation process where technical drafts are being written up. So my goal is to have designers and researchers get more involved in EIPs and ERCs, whether that's reviewing or helping draft it up, doing more research with engineers. So in summary, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but in summary, we need to care about this interconnection of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors when designing products, because we're all human at the end of the day. One product or design choice can impact a user's outcome or the bottom line. And the important part is we operate as humans with familiarity. The human brain likes to predict, and predictions mean a sense of control. It can mean a sense of control over one's assets or their experience. And before I end, there's a really famous design book that all designers might have read called Don't Make Me Think. It's by Steve Krug, and it highlights how simplified experiences need to be, because when something is new to a user, it's a new muscle that needs to be developed, right? It comes down to change. When a new muscle gets developed, it doesn't allow users to follow paths of familiarity and prediction. And our brains ultimately search for familiarity, right? So it's really providing that ease in anxiety as they get set up to onboard to Web3. And a little bit about me, I'm from New York City by way of South Korea. I'm a plant mom, and I love movement of all kinds. Movement in the mind as well. Meditation's very important. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed listening to the psychological roots, and that's just the surface of it, right? I'm not a psychologist. I'm a product designer. But if you find this interesting, come find me on Telegram or LinkedIn or in person. But yeah, thank you.